So Black Lagoon is a 2002 manga written and drawn by the author Ray Hiro, a seinen manga that follows a group of pirates that works as a delivery company known as, you guessed it, the Black Lagoon. This manga would run for about 4 years before getting an anime adaptation in 2006, and I wasn't even old enough to feed myself at the time. So if you're expecting me to talk about how nostalgic the show was, I'm sorry.
No, you ain't!
But I'm not that old. Boomer. I grew up watching Naruto and Dragon Ball Z. Granted, I only watched those two shows because the South African broadcast channel only played those two fucking anime. So unlike most people who were lucky enough to grow up with things like Adult Swim and One Piece, I was only fortunate enough to watch all of these shows and anime around my first year of high school back in 2016. But speaking of Adult Swim, I only discovered Black Lagoon because it used to air on Adult Swim, and I googled this because I didn't have access to the network. This was around 2014 or 2015 if I'm correct, and around that time I wasn't really aware of what I was watching. I just saw this fine anime specimen. Oh yes, please step on me. And I had a crush on her ever since. But if there's one thing I will say is that after watching one episode of the show when I was around 14, I immediately forgot about it the next day. I forgot about Revi, I forgot about what the show was about, I forgot who the characters were, I forgot everything. So it's only until recently that the story has entered my orbit again, and when I saw Revi, something clicked in my brain and I decided to watch the show again. Not because of her, but to see what the show was actually about, and oh boy, do I have words. But before we begin with what I have to say about the show, I want to quickly tell all of you that I appreciate all my old subscribers, and I appreciate the 100 plus of you who've subscribed since the last video.
I love you. Day one.
That includes Handbrake Monster, Dadashi07, Dragon Warrior 1759, and Light Fury BG, and my 250th subscriber, Justin Verhoeven. I appreciate the sub. And as always, if you would like to be part of this community, don't forget to violently smack that like button and continue beating the subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me what your favorite thing about Black Lagoon is, or just leave a comment telling me you love me, cause I know you do. Oh my god, that was cringe. Don't keep that in the video. And with that, let's talk about Black Lagoon. You know, when it comes to action-paced shows and high-octane fight series, shonen anime has kind of poisoned me into expecting something fast-paced to happen on screen every time I'm watching something or just reading a manga. But with shonen, every fight feels story-driven. The reason Luffy fights Doflamingo, for example, is a story-driven fight. The reason Tanjiro fights Michael Jackson is a story-driven fight. And you're probably wondering why I'm mentioning different anime in this section of the video. Well, I needed a way to transition into what the plot of Black Lagoon is, and that's none. The show has no plot. Okay, it does have a plot, but it's not a well-structured plot. Black Lagoon has to have one of the most disjointed plots in all of storytelling history. The story of Black Lagoon starts with Rokuro Okajima, who's kidnapped by a band of pirates who are looking for documents to give to their employer. Revi, the loose cannon of the pirate group, hopes that kidnapping this guy will gain them an extra pay from the ransom money. As Rokuro is with the pirate group, he comes to learn who they are and what type of personalities they all have. They aren't bad people, they're just trying to make a living, and being pirates who do courier work is the only way to make a living. As the episode progresses, we learn that the company that Rokuro works for considers him dead, so they will not pay any money for his retrieval because to them, they think it's a business expense. With that, Rokuro realizes how little his life means to people with more money and power. So when he's offered to take his job back at the end of the episode, he rejects his boss and starts working for the Black Lagoon company and starts going by the name Rock. This is a really great way to start your story off. You introduce your main cast of characters in the beginning, you show off their personalities, and you allow for the story to develop from there. It's so simple, and yet Black Lagoon does it really well. Everyone at the end of episode 1 seems so welcoming of Rock. You get the sense of understanding between the new member of the crew and his crewmates. He got rejected by his boss and essentially the world, so he chose a new path for his life, a path he could live for himself with no constraints of mundane life, with a crew of fellow outcasts who seemed like they could understand his situation because they were also in the same situations either growing up or before they formed the Lagoon Company. Now, what would you expect to happen from this point on in the story? Does Rock start to learn about his individual crewmates' past and try to resolve any unresolved trauma they have by helping them learn from their mistakes and thereby making them better people in the process? No. The answer is no. Instead, we get a disjointed ass plot with mini arcs that happen in the story that do not keep me engaged unless there's a cool action sequence in the episode. I can barely remember anything important from the fight Revy and Rock had in the submarine and the weird incest twins at the start of the second season. I'm not gonna... Everything is a complete blur to me because I think the biggest flaw with the story, or at least in my opinion the anime adaptation, is that the people who were responsible for the anime adaptation were more concerned about how many action scenes they could fit in within the show's 24 episode runtime. Is that a bad thing? No, it isn't. Black Lagoon as a show, when you watch it, isn't something that's deep and philosophical and requires you to watch 200 times to understand its meaning. It's a dumb, fun action show that you're supposed to just turn your brain off to and not really think about when you watch it. Revy looks like this because when you're watching the show, you have some ice candy, wow, that was in the script. Eye candy to keep you slightly invested in. But before I get harassed by manga elitist, I went through the manga and I will admit that the manga has much better story than the anime. I haven't fully read it, so I can't go into full details because I don't have full details, but I will say that I read it until the first 30 chapters, and I can tell you by far that you should read the manga instead of watching the show. The story seems like it knows what it's doing in the manga, the pacing feels a bit more natural, and the action scenes look really great. Hiro really knows how to use wide-scale panels to make his action scenes hit harder, especially when he uses Revy in a panel because it just looks so fucking cool. And speaking of Revy, yes, I'm gonna use this as a way to transition into the next part of what I'm talking about because I know how to segue into different sections of the video. They really butchered Revy in this, and Revy ain't the only character who got wasted in the story. I really don't like the characters in the show and story. Everyone from the Black Lagoon Company to Roberta and Balalaika's group, that doesn't mean I think they're terrible characters and they're uninteresting. No, quite the opposite in fact. I think these characters are really fascinating in terms of who they are, but that's only if you think about who they are. Like I said earlier, this show isn't meant to be studied or dissected in any way. You're supposed to turn off your brain and just watch the show for the dumb fun action it offers. This is something that can be executed really well when you give us interesting characters that make the show really fun to watch. Hellsing Ultimate is a show that came out at the same time as Black Lagoon, and the reason the show is or was as successful as it was because the characters were really interesting. Every one of these characters feels fully fleshed out, but Hellsing Ultimate as a show isn't meant to be taken seriously. It's a show with vampires and Nazis and Nazi vampires and Nazi werewolf vampires and guns and action. A whole lot of action and cool monster designs. And what was I talking about again? Oh yeah, characters. Hellsing Ultimate, like Black Lagoon, isn't a show that needs you to think about it, but the way the characters are in these individual shows makes Hellsing Ultimate more enjoyable, so you can get invested in the mindless action. I'll use the Black Lagoon Company as a perfect example for this. Every member part of the Black Lagoon Company is so underdeveloped. When watching the show with a more critical eye, I saw how undercooked the relationships were between all members of the crew. No one has has a genuine moment of actual character development and fully grows as a character aside from Revi, but even Revi is still a bit messy in terms of character development. The show is very limited on character moments that really stick with the characters. Revi has a bit of a mini plot line I really like that actually showed the audience why we should care about her as a character. She didn't live the best life, lost all faith in humanity, and uses violence as a way to deal with her own trauma. This was a really great thing I enjoyed when they were in the submarine together. It's only enhanced by the fact that when they finished their mission, Revi felt like Rock's presence would force her to remember how hard her old life was. All of this culminated into the scene when her and Rock were getting lunch. This is probably one of the best moments in the manga and story. In this single scene was shown that Revi isn't as strong as she actually pretends to be. Not only that, but was shown that Rock also has found a new resolve in working for the Black Lagoon company. Both of these characters seem to grow from this interaction, but it doesn't seem permanent. It feels like this is an isolated story out of all the mindless action that we see in later episodes, and something I really hate about this section of the story is that it only happens to Revi and Rock. Rock is supposed to be the character we, in my opinion, are supposed to follow as he helps the crew grow into better people. He was basically abandoned and had to start his life over, and is the perfect everyman who takes on this journey of being a pirate and learning all the ins and outs with his crew and eventually helping them grow into better people. But that doesn't happen with any other character. It stops at this moment with Revi and that's it. And what I really hate is that even though the relationship between Rock and Revi does get a little development, it doesn't feel like Revi fully grows as a person. She's still somewhat of the same person, but she's a little more protective of Rock now. Just a little. Okay, maybe more than a little. But you get my point. And this is a good thing. Her character did grow, but why is she the only one who gets this little bit of character growth? Manga readers, please tell me if there's more character growth with any other characters in the story. I need to know. The show has a lot of flaws, and I think watching it with a more critical eye has shown me more bad than good. Don't get me wrong though, I do think that Black Lagoon is an important figure in the seinen genre. I just don't think that Hiro is the one who could have made the story work. But at the same time, without him making this show, we wouldn't have gotten better seinen and adult manga. Black Lagoon kinda set the standard in my opinion for adult animated stuff before we got better stuff years later. Hiro could have run his ideas by his editors, he could have spoken to someone before creating the story, but I'm honestly glad he didn't, because even though the show is very weird with its direction in terms of its storyline and its underdeveloped characters, it's still really fun to watch. The second season literally has an episode with a nun with a fucking gun. If that isn't cool to you, then you definitely get no bitches. I'm sorry, please don't unsubscribe. I love all of you. The show is definitely a product of its time, and you can see it. And to go a bit off script here, you can definitely see with the aesthetic and the vibe of the show that this isn't something that could be made in this current day. I feel like Black Lagoon is one of those shows that is made for an audience that was for that time and not the modern time, because there's no way you could watch this if you are someone who's watched Black Lagoon in 2022 or someone who's watched it back when it dropped in 2006. Then the feeling will obviously be different for both viewers. I don't know if it's because I'm viewing the show in a more critical sense, but it's definitely a product of its time. It's an old show with very, I don't want to say it, but sometimes it's cringe because there's so much cussing in this show, because you can tell this was for an adult audience, but the only thing they knew how to make adult was the cussing, because there's cussing everywhere. That just adds to the charm of the show. So in conclusion, this is back to being part of the script now. In conclusion, this was definitely fun to watch. It wasn't necessarily nostalgic for me because I was too young to even know about the story, but it did remind me of an era of shows I never got to watch because I was too young. But now that I have this channel and I have the chance to see what I missed out on, I can use people's nostalgia to get them to watch my channel. Because of this, I actually watched Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood for the first time in forever because I'd never watched it before. So Black Lagoon made me go and watch an anime that came out before the 2010s. It was a fun time. You should have been there. No, you shouldn't have. It was weird because I didn't show any emotions when watching the show. It was very cringe. Black Lagoon is a show not meant to be taken seriously. Again, I repeat this. You're supposed to turn off your brain, get a group of friends, and just chill out and watch it. This feels like a show made for people who enjoy the Rambo movies. I always had that thought when watching this show, so you'll definitely enjoy it if you're into that. It's 3 out of 10. Greatest anime of all time. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and comment on what you think I should watch or read or review next in a month because my upload schedule is terrible. I always read the comments, and if you have a suggestion, I'll check it out. Thanks again for watching. I love you, no pause. And I'll see y'all later.